Michael and Sarah had always dreamed of living in a peaceful neighborhood. After years of hard work, they finally bought a small house in a quiet community just outside the city. The streets were lined with tall trees, and neighbors often stopped to say hello or share a friendly smile. It was the kind of place where people felt safe, where children played outside, and families came together for barbecues and celebrations. Sarah loved the neighborhood. She spent many mornings in their small garden, planting flowers and vegetables. She believed that a little bit of care could make the world around her beautiful. Michael often watched her with a gentle smile. He admired her patience, kindness, and quiet strength. Sarah was more than just his wife, she was the heart of their home. Though Sarah was calm and gentle, she came from a family with a very different story. She had twin brothers, David and Mark, who were strong and disciplined. Both had served in the Navy SEALs, one of the toughest military units in the world. They had trained for years, facing difficult challenges with courage and teamwork. Even though they lived far away, they always kept a close watch on Sarah, ready to protect her if she ever needed them. One bright Saturday morning, Sarah decided to spend time in their garden. The sun was warm, and a soft breeze moved the leaves gently. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and carried her watering can as she stepped outside. Her neighbors waved from their porches, and the birds sang happily in the trees. Everything seemed perfect. Suddenly, two men appeared near the garden gate. They wore dark uniforms with badges, but the badges looked unfamiliar. The men introduced themselves as officers from the Homeowners Association security team, responsible for enforcing the community's rules. Sarah was surprised. She had never seen these officers before, and the community meetings rarely talked about security officers patrolling the neighborhood. Still, she greeted them politely. "Good morning," Sarah said with a calm voice. "How can I help you?" The taller man spoke first. "We have received reports that you are breaking the community rules." Sarah blinked, confused. "I don't understand. What rules have I broken?" The shorter man stepped forward. "You have been planting flowers and vegetables outside your designated garden area. That is not allowed." Sarah frowned. She looked around, but the flowers she had planted were well within her yard. "I have always taken care of this garden. No one ever told me this was against the rules." The men looked stern. "We are here to enforce the rules. You must remove the plants immediately." Sarah shook her head, feeling a little frustrated but still polite. "I don't think this is fair. The community has never mentioned this to me." The officers exchanged a quick glance. Suddenly, the taller man's voice grew sharper. "You are causing a disturbance, ma'am. You need to cooperate." Sarah took a step back, surprised by their tone. "I am just trying to explain." The situation began to feel uncomfortable. A few neighbors noticed the conversation and started to watch from a distance. Michael, who was inside the house, heard the voices and came out quickly. "What's going on here?" Michael asked, his voice calm but firm. The taller officer turned toward him. "Sir, this is a private matter. Your wife has been breaking community rules." Michael looked at Sarah, then back at the officers. "Can you please explain what rules she broke? Maybe we can talk and solve this peacefully." The shorter officer stepped forward, his expression hard. "We have asked her to remove the plants. She refuses. This is an official warning." Michael felt his patience wearing thin. He looked at Sarah, whose face was calm but showed a hint of worry. This was not how they wanted to start their weekend. "Are you official police officers?" Michael asked, trying to understand. The taller man hesitated. We are community security. We enforce HOA rules. Michael frowned. I want to see your identification. The officers exchanged a quick look, then pulled out badges that looked strange, almost fake. Michael's heart raced. Something didn't feel right. Wait here, Michael said calmly, I'm calling the real police. The officers immediately changed their tone. You don't need to do that. We are doing our job. But Michael wasn't convinced. He stepped back inside and picked up his phone. Suddenly, Sarah's calm voice broke through the tension. Michael, please don't make this worse. He nodded but felt his protective instinct rising. They were being pushed and threatened by people who might not even be real officers. Sarah's face showed no fear, but Michael knew she was upset inside. After a few minutes, the two men left, muttering about next time and rules. The neighbors whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Michael put down his phone and held Sarah's hand tightly. That was strange. I don't think those were real HOA officers. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes shining with quiet determination. Who would do something like this? Michael sighed. I don't know. But if they ever come back, we'll be ready. Little did they know, Sarah's brothers, David and Mark, had already heard about what happened. And they were coming home, ready to protect their sister and their family no matter what. David and Mark sat side by side on the small plane as it flew across the country. Both brothers were silent, lost in their thoughts. Though they hadn't seen their sister Sarah in months, the news from Michael had reached them quickly. The strange men pretending to be HOA officers, the confrontation in the garden, it all worried them deeply. David, the older twin by minutes, tightened his jaw. This doesn't feel right, Mark. Those men were not real security officers. Mark nodded slowly. I agree. It's not just about the plants. It's about how they treated Sarah like she was a criminal. For years, both brothers had lived a life of discipline and action. The Navy SEALs had taught them to stay calm under pressure, to protect those they loved, and to act when danger was near. Now, their sister needed them. As the plane landed, the brothers gathered their bags and stepped out into the busy airport. The noise and rush of travelers seemed distant compared to the storm inside their minds. They shared one goal, to make sure Sarah and Michael were safe. David called Michael as soon as they reached home. We're on our way, he said. Tell Sarah to stay calm and stay inside. Michael's voice was grateful but tense. Thanks, David. She's okay, but they scared her. The brothers drove quickly but carefully through the neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the streets. David glanced at the houses, trying to find any signs of trouble. When they arrived at Michael and Sarah's house, Sarah was waiting by the door, her hands folded nervously. Seeing her brothers, her face lit up with relief. David. Mark, she said softly, stepping forward. Mark pulled her into a warm hug. We heard what happened. Are you okay? Sarah nodded, but her eyes told a different story. I'm scared. I don't know who those men were, but they were very harsh. David looked around the quiet street. We'll figure it out. No one will harm you here. Michael came outside and shook both brothers' hands firmly. Thanks for coming so fast. I felt helpless. David smiled briefly. That's what family is for. Inside the house, the four of them sat together, talking about what had happened. Sarah described the men's uniforms and badges, their strange behavior, and the way they threatened her. Michael told them about his suspicion that the men were not real officers. Mark frowned. "This sounds serious. Someone is trying to scare you, or worse." David nodded. "We need to find out who these men are and why they came here." The brothers had no plans to wait for trouble to return. They decided to check the neighborhood for clues and talk to the neighbors. If someone was pretending to be HOA security, they needed to stop them. Before leaving, David turned to Sarah. "You stay inside tonight. Lock the doors. We'll handle this." Sarah trusted her brothers completely. "Please be careful." David smiled. "We always are." The twins stepped outside into the cool evening. The neighborhood was quiet, but David and Mark knew better than to trust silence. They split up to cover more ground, walking slowly down the streets. Mark stopped at a small corner store. "Have you seen any strange people around here?" he asked the clerk. The clerk shook his head. "No, but some neighbors said they saw men in dark uniforms a few days ago. They didn't look official." Mark thanked him and moved on. David approached a group of neighbors chatting near a mailbox. "Have you noticed anyone acting strangely? People wearing uniforms or badges that don't look right?" An elderly woman spoke up. "Yes, a couple of men came around, asking about garden rules and threatening people. We thought they were new HOA officers, but something felt off." David's face hardened. "Do you remember what they looked like? Anything unusual?" "They had fake badges," another neighbor added. "And they weren't polite at all." David and Mark exchanged a quick look. This wasn't just about garden rules. Someone was trying to scare the whole neighborhood. Back at the house, Sarah sat near the window, watching the street nervously. Michael tried to comfort her, but she knew her brothers would protect them. Still, the fear of the unknown weighed heavy. Hours later, David and Mark returned with more questions than answers. They had spoken to many neighbors but found no real clues about who was behind the fake security officers. David sighed. "We need a plan. Whoever this is, they want to cause trouble." Mark nodded. "We'll keep watch tonight. If they come back, they'll meet us." Sarah felt safer knowing her brothers were ready. "Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you." David smiled gently. "You never have to find out." That night, the family stayed close, watching and waiting. The peaceful neighborhood felt different now. Shadows seemed longer, and every sound was sharper. But one thing was clear: no one would hurt Sarah or Michael while David and Mark were near. The brothers were ready to protect their family, no matter what came next. The night was quiet, but the tension inside Michael and Sarah's house was heavy. David and Mark took turns keeping watch by the windows, their eyes sharp, scanning every movement outside. Sarah sat close to Michael, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to calm herself. "Everything will be okay," Michael whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "They're here now." Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful under the soft glow of the streetlights. The tall trees swayed gently in the night breeze, but to David and Mark, every shadow seemed suspicious. They were not going to let anything happen to their sister or her husband. Hours passed slowly. The twins stayed alert, speaking softly about what to do next. They agreed to contact the local police the next day and ask for more help. But for now, they had to protect Sarah and Michael with what they had. Suddenly, Mark saw a movement near the end of the street. "David, look," he whispered, pointing toward two figures walking slowly between the houses. David's eyes narrowed. Those must be the men from before. The two figures moved carefully, wearing dark clothes and carrying something that looked like badges in their hands. They looked nervous, as if they knew they were being watched. David grabbed his phone and quietly dialed the police. "We're watching two suspicious men in our neighborhood," he told the officer on the line. "They've been harassing my sister and her husband." The police said they would send officers to check the area. David and Mark stayed where they were, watching as the men stopped near Sarah and Michael's house. One of them tried to open the gate. Mark took a step forward, his voice low but firm. "Hey! What are you doing here?" The men froze and turned toward him. Their faces showed surprise but quickly changed to anger. "We're HOA officers," one said loudly. "We're here to enforce the rules." David stepped forward, his military training clear in his calm, strong voice. "I don't think you are. Real officers don't threaten people and don't wear fake badges." The men looked at each other nervously. "You don't want trouble," the other said. "Just leave us alone." David shook his head. "You came here to scare my sister. That's a problem." Mark moved closer, ready if the men tried to act. "You should leave before this gets worse." At that moment, flashing blue and red lights appeared at the end of the street. The police had arrived. The men saw the lights and quickly turned to run. But the police were faster. They caught both men and began to ask questions. David and Mark told the officers everything they knew. The police checked the men's badges and uniforms and confirmed they were fake. The men had no permission to act as HOA officers or security. Sarah and Michael stepped outside, watching the police handle the situation. Sarah's eyes were filled with relief. "Thank you," she said softly to her brothers. "I felt so scared before you came." David smiled. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Michael put his arm around Sarah. "We're safe now." The police took the men away for questioning. Later, they explained that the men were part of a group trying to take control of the neighborhood. They wanted to scare people into following their fake rules and pay extra fees. It was a scheme to make money by frightening homeowners. The news shocked the neighbors. Many came out to thank David and Mark for their quick action. One neighbor, Mrs. Parker, an elderly woman who lived across the street, said, "You saved all of us from those bullies. We're so grateful." David nodded. "We're just glad we were here in time." Even though the immediate danger was gone, David and Mark knew the fight was not over. They began organizing meetings with neighbors to explain what had happened and how to stay safe. They encouraged everyone to report suspicious activity and not be afraid to stand together. Sarah watched her brothers with admiration. They were strong and brave, but they also cared deeply about the community. It was a side of them she had always known but never seen so clearly until now. That night, as the family gathered inside their home, Sarah felt a new sense of hope. The shadows in the neighborhood had grown darker, but so had the light that came from standing together. Michael looked at Sarah and whispered, "We're not just neighbors. We're family." And with her brothers by her side, Sarah knew they could face whatever came next. The days after the arrest of the fake officers brought a strange mix of relief and uncertainty to the neighborhood. The people felt safer knowing that the men had been caught, but the fear of what might come next lingered in the air. David and Mark spent most of their time helping neighbors understand what had happened. They organized meetings in Michael and Sarah's living room, inviting people to share their concerns and ask questions. At one meeting, Sarah spoke softly but clearly. "We cannot let fear control us. If we stand together, we can protect our community from anyone who tries to harm it." Her words touched many hearts. The neighbors nodded in agreement, feeling inspired by the strength Sarah showed despite all she had been through. Michael stood beside her and added, "We all want to live in a safe and happy place. That means looking out for one another and speaking up when something feels wrong." Slowly, the neighborhood began to change. People who had once stayed inside now walked their dogs together, talked across fences, and helped with small projects to improve the area. There was a new sense of friendship and trust. David and Mark helped by teaching some basic safety tips. "Always lock your doors," David said during one meeting. "If someone comes to your door claiming to be an officer or security, ask to see their real ID. If you're not sure, call the police." Mark added, "Don't be afraid to speak up. It's better to be safe than sorry." As the neighborhood grew stronger, the twins also took time to reconnect with Sarah and Michael in quieter moments. They shared stories from their time in the Navy SEALs, how teamwork and trust had saved them many times. One evening, after a long day of meetings and talking with neighbors, the four sat on the porch together. The warm light of the setting sun made everything feel calm. Sarah looked at her brothers and smiled. "I never realized how much strength you both carry inside you." David chuckled softly. "It's not just strength. It's about knowing when to act and when to listen." Mark nodded. "And knowing that we're never alone." Michael watched the three of them with respect. "I'm glad you're here. We're lucky to have you." Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked the message and frowned. "It's from one of the neighbors," she said quietly. "They say they saw another strange man near the park. He didn't look like the fake officers, but he was watching the houses." David stood up immediately. "We can't ignore this." Mark grabbed his jacket. "Let's check it out. We'll make sure everything is okay." Michael wanted to go with them, but Sarah stopped him gently. "Stay with me, please. We need to be careful." David nodded. "We'll be quick. We just want to see what's going on." The brothers walked toward the park, their senses alert. The night air was cool, and the streets were quieter than during the day. They moved carefully, watching for any signs of danger. Near the park bench, they saw a man sitting alone, looking around nervously. He wore a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. David approached slowly. "Hello. Can we help you?" The man looked up, startled. "I'm just waiting for a friend," he said quickly. Mark studied him carefully. "Which friend? Who are you meeting here?" The man hesitated. "No one you need to know about." David and Mark exchanged a glance. Something about the man didn't feel right. "Sir, this is a public park. If you're not here for something good, you should leave." The man stood up suddenly, his hands in his pockets. "Look, I don't want trouble." David took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. "Neither do we. But if you cause problems, we'll have to call the police." The man hesitated again, then nodded. "Okay. I'm leaving." As he walked away, David whispered to Mark, "We need to watch the neighborhood even more closely. This could be just the beginning." When they returned, Sarah and Michael were waiting on the porch. The worry on their faces grew as David told them about the man in the park. Sarah sighed deeply. "I thought the worst was over." Michael held her hand. "We'll get through this. We have to." That night, the family stayed close together. The neighborhood might have felt safer during the day, but the night still held its mysteries. David and Mark took turns standing watch again, reminding everyone that protection was not just about strength, it was about caring for those you love and never giving up. Sarah looked at her brothers and whispered, "Thank you for never leaving me alone." David smiled softly. "We're family. That's what family does." The days passed, but the feeling of unease did not leave the neighborhood. Even though the fake officers had been caught, the family and neighbors knew that someone was still watching, someone who wanted to cause trouble. David and Mark took their job seriously, checking the streets regularly and encouraging everyone to stay alert. One morning, Michael was fixing the fence when Sarah came outside with a worried look on her face. "Michael," she said quietly, "I got another message from Mrs. Parker. She saw a strange car parked near her house late last night. It stayed there for a long time." Michael frowned. "We can't let this go on. I'll talk to David and Mark." Later that day, the brothers met with Michael and Sarah in the living room. The sunlight poured through the windows, but inside the house, tension still filled the air. David rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "This is more than just two men pretending to be HOA officers. Someone is planning something bigger." Mark nodded. "We need to find out who it is before it's too late." Sarah looked at her brothers, her eyes full of trust. "What can I do to help?" David smiled. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Stay calm and tell us if anything else seems strange." Mark added, "We'll take care of the rest." That night, David and Mark sat at the kitchen table, looking over maps of the neighborhood and making notes. They wanted to know every street, every house, and every path someone might use to sneak in or out. "We have to be ready for anything," David said firmly. Mark agreed. "If they want to cause fear, we'll stop them." Meanwhile, Sarah tried to keep life as normal as possible. She watered her garden and cooked dinner with Michael, trying not to let the worry take over. But deep inside, she knew that danger was closer than ever. One afternoon, as Sarah walked to the nearby grocery store, she noticed a man standing across the street, watching her. He wore sunglasses and a hat, but something about his slow, careful movements made her nervous. Sarah quickened her pace and went inside the store, but the man didn't follow. He stayed outside, looking around as if waiting for someone. Back home, Sarah told Michael what she had seen. "That man at the store, it wasn't a good feeling." Michael nodded. "I'll tell David and Mark. We'll make sure to watch the area." That evening, the brothers arrived with a plan. "We'll take turns watching the streets. We'll also talk to neighbors and make sure everyone knows what to look for." David added, "We're going to organize a neighborhood watch group. If everyone works together, no one can get away with anything." The idea made Sarah smile for the first time in days. "That sounds good. I want to help too." Over the next week, the neighborhood changed again. Signs for the neighborhood watch were posted on street corners. Groups of neighbors met in small gatherings, sharing phone numbers and safety tips. Sarah joined the meetings, feeling proud of her community. For the first time since the trouble began, she felt hopeful. But the night was still full of secrets. One evening, as Sarah and Michael sat on their porch, a sudden noise came from the bushes nearby. They both stood up quickly, their hearts pounding. Michael grabbed a flashlight and shone it toward the noise. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, a figure stepped out, a young man, looking nervous and scared. "Who are you?" Michael asked, his voice steady but serious. The man took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare anyone. I wanted to warn you." Sarah and Michael exchanged surprised looks. "Warn us?" About what? The young man hesitated, then spoke quickly. The people behind the fake officers, they're planning something big. They're trying to take control of the whole neighborhood. I'm part of the group, but I don't want to be. I wanted to tell you before it's too late. Michael looked at Sarah, then back at the man. Why should we trust you? The man looked down, ashamed. You don't have to trust me. But please, be careful. They're dangerous. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. Thank you for telling us. We'll protect this neighborhood. The young man nodded, then disappeared into the night. Michael and Sarah quickly called David and Mark. The brothers arrived within minutes, ready to listen and plan. After hearing the warning, David said, "This confirms what we feared. The threat is bigger than we thought." Mark added, "We have to act fast. We can't let them win." The family prepared for the days ahead, knowing that protecting their home would require all their courage and unity. Sarah looked around at the people she loved and the community they were building. No matter what happened, they would face it together, stronger and braver than ever before. After the young man's warning, the family and neighbors knew they could not wait any longer. The threat was real, and it was growing. David and Mark took charge, planning carefully to protect Sarah, Michael, and everyone in the neighborhood. The brothers called a neighborhood meeting the very next evening. The local community center was filled with concerned faces, parents, grandparents, young couples, and children all ready to listen. David stood at the front, his voice strong but calm. "We know there is a group trying to take control of this neighborhood. They want to scare you, force you to follow their fake rules, and make money from fear." Mark stepped forward. "But we won't let them. We're going to organize a watch group, and we'll work together to keep everyone safe." Sarah, standing beside Michael, looked at the crowd and added, "We are stronger when we stand together. Let's protect our homes, our families, and our peace." The crowd nodded, some wiping tears, others smiling with hope. David explained the plan in detail: neighborhood watch, everyone would keep an eye on the streets and report anything suspicious to a central number. Communication, they would create a group chat for quick alerts and updates. Emergency contacts, police and local authorities would be invited to join meetings regularly. Self-defense training, David and Mark offered to teach simple safety and defense techniques to anyone interested. Patrols, volunteers would take turns walking or driving around the neighborhood at night. After the meeting, many volunteers signed up. Sarah felt proud of the community's courage and kindness. The next days were busy. David and Mark organized training sessions in the park, teaching neighbors how to stay calm in emergencies, how to notice strange behavior, and simple ways to protect themselves without fighting. Michael helped by coordinating the communication group, making sure everyone could share information quickly. Sarah focused on supporting neighbors emotionally. She visited elderly residents and helped families who were still scared to leave their homes. Despite their efforts, the brothers knew the danger was still close. One afternoon, David received a call from the police. "We've found more fake badges and uniforms in a nearby town," the officer said. "This group is bigger than we thought." David shared the news with Mark and Michael. "They're spreading out. We need to be ready for anything." Mark nodded. "Let's increase our patrols and keep everyone alert." That evening, as the sun set, David and Mark took their usual positions by the windows of Michael and Sarah's house. Sarah and Michael sat nearby, watching the neighborhood slowly darken under the night sky. Suddenly, a soft noise came from the street, a car driving slowly, lights off. David noticed immediately. "That's not normal," he whispered. Mark grabbed his phone and called the neighborhood watch group. "Be on alert. A suspicious vehicle is driving through." The car stopped near the park and two men got out, moving cautiously. They looked around as if searching for something or someone. David's heart raced. He and Mark quickly stepped outside, their military training guiding their movements. "Hey!" David called out. "What are you doing here?" The men froze, their faces hidden in the dark. One of them spoke in a low voice, "We're just looking around." Mark stepped closer, his voice firm. "This neighborhood is on watch. If you don't leave now, we'll call the police." The men hesitated but slowly turned and walked back to their car. They drove away, their lights still off. David watched until the car disappeared down the street. "They're testing us." Mark sighed. "We have to stay strong. They want to scare us, but they won't win." When they returned inside, Sarah wrapped her arms around Michael. "I'm glad you're here," she said softly. Michael smiled. "We're all here. Together." The next morning, the neighborhood felt alive with hope and determination. Children played outside, neighbors talked over fences, and volunteers prepared for the next patrol. Sarah looked at her brothers with deep gratitude. "You gave us strength when we needed it most." David smiled gently. "Family is everything. We protect each other." Mark nodded. "And we protect our home." As the days passed, the community grew closer and stronger. The threat from outside remained, but the bonds inside the neighborhood could not be broken. No matter what challenges came next, Sarah, Michael, David, and Mark knew they would face them together with courage, love, and hope. The neighborhood had changed. What once was a quiet, peaceful place had become a community bound by courage and unity. The dark days of fear and uncertainty were slowly fading, replaced by hope and trust. Sarah, Michael, David, and Mark had faced many challenges together, and now they stood stronger than ever. One clear morning, Sarah walked outside to the garden, breathing in the fresh air. Flowers bloomed brightly, and children's laughter echoed from the street. It was a beautiful day, a perfect symbol of the new peace they had built. Michael joined her, smiling. "It feels good to see everyone happy again." Sarah nodded. "We made it through the hardest times." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. David and Mark appeared, both looking tired but satisfied. "We have news," David said. "The police arrested the leaders of the group behind the fake officers. They won't be coming back." Mark smiled. Thanks to the neighborhood watch and everyone's help, the police had enough evidence to stop them for good. Sarah's eyes filled with tears of relief. "I can't believe it's finally over." Michael wrapped an arm around her. "It's because we never gave up." The family stood together, feeling the weight of the past month slowly lift. That evening, the neighborhood held a celebration in the park. Tables were filled with food, children played games, and neighbors talked and laughed like old friends. Sarah looked around, feeling grateful. This is what home should be. David raised his glass. "To everyone who stood strong and protected our community." Mark joined in. "Together, we made a difference." Michael smiled and said, "And together, we'll keep it safe." As the sun set, Sarah thought about everything they had faced: the fear, the danger, the long nights, but also the love and support that had carried them through. She turned to her brothers. "Thank you for being my strength." David shook his head gently. "You've always had strength inside you." Mark added, "We just helped you see it." Michael squeezed her hand. "And we'll always be here for you." The night ended with smiles and promises. The neighborhood had been tested but never broken. It was a place where people cared, where families looked out for each other, and where courage won over fear. Sarah looked at the stars shining above and whispered, "This is our home. And it's safe now."